Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at one of last week's Gran Turismo daily races, notably the Suzuka circuit, a very difficult track prompting many mistakes as you'll see later on in the video. Jumping straight into the qualifying time trial, the Suzuka circuit, it's always been a track I've enjoyed just given its high-speed nature and its fabulous overtaking opportunities. Anyways, heading down into turn 1, short shifting into third upon the exit, coming out of turn 2 here, and heading up into turn 3, part of the S curves, which includes turns 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, a quick note on the BMW that I'm using. It's very unstable, like you just saw there, especially when you're using low traction control settings. It just doesn't hold up. It gets unsettled very easily. Now heading up into the Dunlop curve, a very long left-hander, and braking just before the 50 board with a fast right-hander, again heading into turn 9. Again, the BMW gets a little unsettled on the exit, but that's fine as we set at 54.27 in our first sector, which is pretty average. It's not the best. Exiting the hairpin, we actually get a great exit as the car really loves to get unsettled there if you apply too much throttle too quickly. Anyways, now we have a very, very long right-hander of turn 12, and we're going to be braking at the gray patch on the right side. Hitting the apex quite nicely, actually. I'm pretty happy with that. Hitting the apex as well on turn 14, heading into the long back straight. This straight is pretty long, so we're just going to be fast-forwarding. Heading into 130R, turning right at the 50 board, carrying a lot of speed through this corner, braking right between the 100 and the 150 meter board. These chicanes, you have to be very careful because the BMW especially really loves to get unsettled, and sticking all the way to the right hand side to get the best time possible, and it will be a 159.823, which was enough to start me P2 for my first attempt at this race. Heading into my first race, my main goal is to just try to keep the car on track, especially through turns 1 and 2, as the car really loves to just get unsettled there. As the race goes underway, we're just behind in the slipstream from the Alfa Romeo in front. As we go into turn 1, we absolutely bottle it. And once this car goes off track, no matter what you do, it just won't come back on the track. So we get passed up and lose around 10 places, I'd say. So we're down into 9th. We get a shove from the back, which leaves us with rear bumper damage. Heading into the Dunlop curve here shortly, the car just begins to become more and more unsettled, again with the damage in the back. We are going to momentarily get passed up by the guy on the left, and the reason why I say momentarily is because we get shoved wide by another car behind, but don't worry because he gets what's coming to him. So far, it's been absolute chaos in the beginning of this race as we come up into the hairpin, hitting our braking point quite nicely actually, hitting the apex as well. Coming out of the hairpin, the car also just loves to get unsettled out of there as we fast forward a little bit through this long right-hander, as the Brazilian in 8th goes a little wide, giving us the position as we exit out a spoon curve onto the long back straight. The Ferrari up ahead actually loses control, handing us another position, so we're up into 7th by the end of the first lap, which is pretty good considering the start we had. Fast forwarding a little bit on the main straight as we head up into turns 1 and 2, as the Corvette, previously in P5, just decides it's enough and enters the Shadow Realm. Skipping forward a little bit to the beginning of lap 3, coming into turns 1 and 2, the first corner claiming 2 more victims, giving us 2 positions in the race, putting us into P4. The BMW and the Porsche coming into a collision, I'd imagine. Again, skipping forward a little bit to the beginning of lap 4, as the race just sort of died down. Not much action was happening until coming up into turn 1, claiming yet another victim. This time, it was me. Luckily, though, I was able to keep the car running, only losing 1 position to the Brazilian in front, which I would later claim back. However, that moment would have to wait, as another Brazilian behind would be attacking me, so I have to go on the defensive coming into the hairpin. A little bit of contact with him, momentarily losing the position actually, but I end up keeping the inside, kissing the apex, and just driving off, keeping the inside for the long right-hander, forcing him to take the outside, which loses you around half a tenth, I'd say. So the position is mine to keep for now. Coming up into the famous spoon curve, turns 13 and 14, we actually go a little bit wide on turn 14, heading onto the long back straight here. The guy behind was too far back to try and make a move through 130R, so the position was ours for the start of the final lap. Just moving over to cover the inside line from the guy behind, but he's too far back to make a move, so heading down into turns 1 and 2, claiming yet another victim. This time it was the BMW in front, handing us back P4, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. Nobody was able to challenge me until the end, so we end up finishing a respectable P4, which is pretty good considering the horrible start we had, losing 7 positions. Jumping straight into the second race, starting P2 again, and my main goal for this race was, again, just to keep the car on track, especially through turns 1 and turn 2, as I mentioned in the previous race. Into turn 1 and turn 2 now, we actually managed to not bottle the start like last race and keep it on track, maybe momentarily losing just a little bit of time to P1, but we'll gain that time back as the guy in P1 does make a little bit of a mistake through the Dunlop curve, as we'll see pretty shortly. Heading up now into the Dunlop curve out of turn 7, the guy in P1 just drives a little bit onto the grass, which costs him a couple of tenths. As you can see, we're catching up a little and braking right before the 50 board, straight into the double right-hander. The car gets unbalanced through here, but we actually get a great exit, heading up now into the hairpin, braking right as the curb on the right side ends, kissing the apex. The guy in P1 actually goes a bit wide, actually getting a great drive out of the hairpin, maybe a little bit slower than the guy in P1, but we managed to keep up with him as we're just sitting in the slipstream waiting for an opportunity to overtake. Heading up into turns 13 here, actually going a bit wide and losing control yet again of the car, allowing the BMW and the Lamborghini in front to slip through. Both of them on the exit though have a bit of a moment going up into the long straight. The Lamborghini backs out right before 130R, as it's not a very smart idea to try to keep the position through there. Carrying a lot of speed through that turn, now in P3 by the end of lap 1, which is not ideal as we lost out a little to the BMW. Going a little bit wide through the chicane actually, and coming to the end of the first lap, we have lost a place. But for now, it's all eyes behind us because the Lamborghini is actually going to be attacking. So we're going to cover the inside line here. He goes to the outside, a little bit of contact, but we managed to keep the inside line for turns 1 and 2, hitting both apexes quite nicely, getting a great drive out of the corner, and the position is ours to keep. But the Lamborghini is still very close behind, so we will have to keep an eye on him. Skipping forward a little bit to 130R, we are going to take the inside line once again. Again, a little bit of contact between both of us, but I managed to keep the position, which is the main thing. Coming up into the last chicane, going very wide actually, but getting a better exit than the Lamborghini behind. As you can see on the radar, he just falls a bit behind, meaning he won't be able to contest for P3 into turn 1. But just in case, as you see, I'm just covering the inside line. Him and the guy behind are actually going to battle it out through turn 1, so I don't really have to worry. Into turn 1 now, going a bit wide and just again losing control of the BMW. It's just such a hard car to control, especially when you're on low traction control settings, as I touched earlier on in the video. We lose practically all our positions because of that moment, going from P3 to P11, and even worse, we spin out yet again, mainly due to the dirt on the tires from the previous moment. We do manage to get the car started and rolling again, but still the car just loses traction in every corner. It's very much so like we're racing on ice here. Just coming up into the Dunlop curve, losing even more traction. Just trying to keep my head down though and try and catch up to P13. I'm just thinking to myself at this moment that my race can't get any worse than it already is. Heading up now into Spoon Curve, things are now going to go from bad to worse. As coming out of turn 13, my game decides to crash. An unexpected error has occurred. So I start up Gran Turismo again, go back into sport mode and back to the Suzuka daily race, where I decide to try something a little bit different and switch over to the Nissan GTR Nismo. For this race, we're actually going to be starting in P1, which means my main goal is to try to win this race. Not like the other races I wasn't trying to win, it's just that things didn't go according to plan. This race, however, I feel confident that with the Nissan, a more stable car than the BMW, that we can pull off this win. As the lights go out here shortly, we're going to be covering the inside line from the guy behind, just trying to defend our position into turn 1, going back over to the normal racing line. Into turn 1 we go, hitting the apex nicely. It's not as unstable through here as the BMW was, hitting the second apex as well quite nicely and getting a great exit. Now into turn 3 we go, just trying not to make mistakes and just waiting for the guy behind to make a mistake so we can just pull away nice and easy here. Heading up into turn 7, the BMW usually got unstable here, but the GTR, it seems to be working pretty well. Into the long left-hander of the Dunlop curve, just pulling away slightly from the Brazilian behind, the gap at about half a second now. Into Degner curve we go in 4th gear, and immediately after driving this car for just a couple of turns, I already noticed that it's way more stable than the BMW, especially around the exits where you need to apply throttle. Up into the hairpin now, we're going to get a pretty good entry into the corner and a great exit as we just fast forward just a little bit here. Up into turn 13, the Spoon curve, getting just a great entry as well and hitting both apexes quite nicely. Heading onto the long straight. We're going to fast forward just a little bit here too, heading up into 130R. Turning right at the 50-meter board and carrying a lot of speed through this corner as well. Now the gap to what is the Argentinian behind is just over a second as we come to the end of lap 1. Not too much to say about this lap as there was really no action. So we're just going to skip over onto the beginning of lap 3. As you see, the gap to P2 remains pretty much the same. Heading now into turn 8, the Degner curve, just braking right before the 50-meter board for a fast right-hand turn. Keeping an eye on the guy behind as through one of these corners he actually makes a mistake, so the Felipe Massa is now in P2. Who knew the legendary Brazilian Formula 1 driver plays Gran Turismo? Could have fooled me. Heading now into the chicane at the end of lap 4. We're just going to get a great entry and great exit here. The gap to P2 is right around 5.5 seconds, so pretty happy with that. It's the final lap, and all I need to do is just cruise home to take the win. And at this point, I'm just thinking, what really could go wrong? Just keep the car on track. Well, I was wrong, and I couldn't keep the car on track. Very lucky for me, though, that I was able to get control of the car pretty quickly and continue on as if nothing happened. Just keeping an eye on the gap, as it has gone down quite a bit, but not nearly enough. As we come to the end of lap 5, into the final chicane, getting a pretty good exit, just making sure not to apply too much throttle too quickly or else the car will spin out. Sticking to the inside line as we come home to take victory at the Suzuka circuit. There we go, quite an interesting daily race this week. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing if you did enjoy, and give us a follow on Instagram if you want to see more content. That is all for me, and have a nice day. Goodbye.